so much for having me, Kim. This is really, truly a pleasure for me.
Oh, it's kind of cool.
I run a nonprofit called EduSeed, based here in Washington, D.C. And our signature program is called SisterMentors. And SisterMentors helps young girls from low-income families in elementary, middle, and high school, mentors and supports them as they stay in school, do well, and go on to college. And these girls are mentored by women of color, doctoral students who we help to complete their dissertation and earn their doctorates.
So what you do also, what I find is most engaging, is you mentor women that are in the PhD process.
Exactly, and we have helped 41 women so far to earn doctorates and sent quite a few girls off to college.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you.
You said that this morning you were on your way. Will you please tell us where you were and what happened?
I went to Howard University's famous Banquet Chapel on the grounds of Howard University here in Washington, D.C. And Professor Paulette West was the one who gave the sermon this morning. And it was, as always, I went last year and I went back again to see it for so much inspiration and motivation. He is so inspiring. And he talked about what he always talks about. Ordinary people who are just, down and out, who we need to constantly be looking out for. Poor people, black people, black people, everyone who's out there who MLK, Martin Luther King was so concerned about. That's the population that Paulette West is very interested in. I really admire that he takes his activism out of the university and into the streets. I really admire that.
Now, yesterday you and I had a little set too, because I said, well, I'm not very pleased with some of the things that Dr. West has said recently with respect to President Obama, and you immediately said, what?
I said we can love Obama, but we can still tell him like it is. Keep him in touch with reality. I think that's what Tabitha Smiley and Paulette West are doing. Let's talk about poor people. Let's talk about their struggles. Let's talk about the fact that the middle class is now getting on out to the underclass. Let's talk about those things that are happening here in the United States, and let's deal with that in a very fundamental level.
Yes, you did. And when I asked you who you thought was the loudest voice with respect to women of color now, you said whom?
I said Angela Davis.
And why did you say Angela Davis?
I so admire her work in prisons, and she's always been very, this is her lifelong work actually, and I've been reading Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and I recommend it to everyone because it talks about what Angela Davis has been talking about for so many years. The incarceration of so many black and brown people. We need to be more educated about that.
And you were also saying something very interesting about you felt that we had a very significant need for Saturday schools. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, it's something I've been thinking more and more about because I think even our organization, we need to do a better job about that. What we have is a whole lot of young people, all kinds of them, generations coming up who don't know enough about their history, therefore they know very little about their identity. And I think we have an identity crisis going on where young people are not making connections between their own individual lives and the lives of so many great people who have gone before us, and what they need to do in order to continue the legacy. And I think that's a failure on our part, and we need to correct that. Saturday schools, I think, it will be something like what a friend of mine said, something like Hebrew schools. You're going to go and need to know your past so you can understand your present and plan for your future. I think we need that. We need that in our black communities.
Yes, ma'am. Now, you said, when I asked you what's your inspiration for starting EduSeed and SisterMentors, you told me a story. What was that?
Well, I talked about the Black Power movement in the Caribbean, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, where I was born and grew up. And that was my inspiration. We had our first president after independence was a PhD from Oxford, a black man who was Trinidadian himself. And even he, with his own race consciousness, because he taught at Howard University and he took part in Presence African conferences in France, still didn't understand that we needed to really be more focused and conscious of what sort of images of each other, of black people that we have out in the public space, and how that impacts young people coming up and their own search for their identity. So that has been played a really crucial part in my understanding oppression, slavery, colonization, and in me wanting to do something, especially to bring the younger generation along.
How did you come to Paulette Nardal, and who was she? If you do any significant research on negritude, which is sort of the Black consciousness movement, which was taking place in France in the 1920s and 30s, emerged at that time. If you do any significant research, you cannot miss the name Paulette Nardal. This is a woman who was a trailblazer, a pioneer. She was Martinican, belonged to the Black Martinican bourgeoisie. Her parents were well off at that time. And she grew up in a home where, intellectual life and also artistic life was valued. Father played the flute and her mother played the piano. So they grew up with a lot of music around there. She won one of the first scholarships to the Sorbonne and studied in Paris. And while she was there, she and her sisters and other black women, including a woman called Carol Shepherd from Howard University, they began to organize writings, had a review called Revue du Monde Noir, the Review of the Black World, and also had a salon where writers from the Harlem Renaissance like Langston Hughes, Claude McKay came and visited. And that's how the people from negritude, Ines Césaire and Leopold Singer, that's how they met and were influenced by black writers from the Harlem Renaissance through Paulette Nardal and her salon that she kept right outside Paris. The Salon Clément. Was it called the Salon Clément?
Yeah, exactly. So she was a pioneer. She came up with the ideas of black consciousness, of this whole thing of looking for your identity in Africa, not being ashamed of your African identity, which was very much a part of what was going on at that time. And this whole sort of black consciousness, she was the pioneer. She and the women around her were the pioneers in that. And then from that negritude came out. So you cannot talk about the birth of black consciousness or of modern black francophone literature without talking about Paulette Nardal.
Why is it that there's so little available about Paulette Nardal?
Well, I think she said it herself. I think as women, at that time, they were marginalized. Their work wasn't really recognized. Their efforts weren't really recognized. And she complained about this in the 1960s. And she says the men took up the ideas and exploited it later with a whole lot of value. So they did it in a much more sort of radical way, which caught the attention of other intellectuals in Paris at that time, and that's how the movement took off. But it was not uncommon at that time, and still isn't today, for women's contributions to not be recognized. And so that is what was going on there.
Would you mind if we have a few questions?
Not at all.